you are, Jim. All the upgrades, and now we're going into chapter 8 of Finding Bagpipe Freedom.
Yeah, chapter 8. This is where it gets real good. You might
It
call this
does.
the meeting of the waters. Oh, excuse
The,
me, the meeting of the dimensions. That's what it
the
is here.
the meaning of the dimensions, it's where the rubber hits the road, Jim.
Yeah, here we got rubber and road meeting for the first time.
I think that what's interesting about this is there's going to have to be a moment. I haven't figured it out yet. Maybe a Joe Brady or someone of equivalent genius will call me someday and help me solve this equation. But really, at some point, mathematically, the rubber's going to have to hit the road, right?
In here, you say, let's see, how do you put it? You say, even though we haven't even discussed expression or embellishments at all yet, each player makes it to this stage already. Excuse me, each player that makes it to this stage is already showing incredible confidence because they're actually beginning to control what's
Mhm.
going on with their bagpipe. And that means this phase that we're in right now. And to me, this is maybe a little bit of that. Here's a breadcrumb of what is possible to keep you going. If this
Yeah.
is feeling like a really tedious kind of process, like just recognizing that isn't that a great feeling that you have at least some measure of control when it comes to the bagpipes?
Yes,
You
it
know?
is. I think
Because the
so.
bagpipes control us by default. They're such a difficult thing to play. So when you feel like you
Yeah.
actually do know what's going on, at least to some degree, that can be so encouraging.
Yeah. Yeah. Jim, do you own your house?
No.
You don't? Okay. So someday, Jim, when you grow
Some
up.
I'm working that direction
Yeah.
slowly but surely.
So, I mean, I guess technically I don't own my house either. I have a mortgage.
Okay, that's what I meant. I have a mortgage as well. Yeah.
But like one of the amazing things about buying a house is the feeling that it's yours. And
Yeah.
it's very different than renting, right? It's like when you rent, you're more or less, you're not really in control of the situation. Like you have a lease that protects you for your lease term and whatever and blah, blah, blah. But it's, man, once it's yours, it's a really interesting feeling. And by the way, it's this very similar feeling like, oh, I could do whatever I want here. Like I'm in
Mm.
control. I'm in the driver's seat. The possibilities are infinite and endless. And it's
Definitely
the
what got me
same.
most excited about getting our house after we left the last apartment we were in was like, I can hang whatever I want on whatever wall I want. I can
Yeah.
paint it whatever color I want. That was the very
Yeah.
exciting.
Absolutely. And so it reminds me of a similar thing. Just going back to the capitalism analogy, right? It's we've built real skill capital here, right?
Mm.
It's we have some rhythmic accuracy. And by the way, when we don't have it, we have a plan to get it, which
Yeah,
is really
yeah, yeah.
important as well. Like a lot of pipers wouldn't even have a plan. It's like, oh, this is all over the place. Where do I even begin? Somebody that has this process would know. It's like, oh, this is a hot mess. Cool. Let's boil it down to the rhythm and
Mhm.
let's build it back up again. So not only do you have more skill, but you also have a plan that you have experience with, that you have confidence with, that allows you to build back up through it. And that's capital, right? That is a tool that you can use to apply to future situations, right? And it takes a little bit longer to acquire capital, but the magnification effects are very high with it.
This makes me think of when we were talking with Ed Best, and he pointed out that achieving drumming freedom, by the same ideas, right?
Same idea.
It's like you're not just learning a tune, you are building capital in terms
That's
of the
right.
skills that you have. And so they're going to be applicable to everything else you ever do.
Yep,
And I feel like this is,
there's 2 reasons to learn any tune, and by the way, for drummers, there's 2 reasons to learn a drum score. Number 1, that you like the tune,
mm,
and it'll be fun to play. That's the reason most people focus on, but the second reason to learn a tune is way more important and in the long run, far more rewarding, which is the reason you learn a new tune is to improve yourself as a player. And you're gonna build and so I cut you off, Jim, but
no, no worries.
the point that Ed made was every time you learn a drum score, you're getting better at your
Hmm.
skills, right? And that makes you better. That gives you that experience. And you have more experience putting the fundamentals to the test, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
And it seems like this is maybe something that's very important to remind ourselves of as we're going through this process, because I think it can, and this isn't a dig on the book. This is human condition, the way that our brains work. It can maybe feel like we're chasing bagpipe freedom and we're going to get there someday. And until then, we're not going to get to reap any of the rewards for our hard work. Right. And that's
Yeah.
part of what makes it seem like it's taking forever. When am I going to get to where this is nice? So if we pause for a minute and think, look, in phase 1, it was rhythmic accuracy. In phase 2, it was scale navigation. In 3, it was instrument skills, right? And it's not necessarily that we are now perfect at these things, but we definitely have more capital in these areas right now today than we did a week ago. And
Exactly.
we can spend that capital today while building more skill capital. We can have more fun playing the bagpipes right away. It's not you get to the end of the process and then you have fun. We can have
Yeah,
fun while we're building more.
exactly. It's like you can build an outdoor fire pit, then you can dig a well, right? And so those are two pieces of capital that you've built. But then now that you have both, what can you build that utilizes now that you have both of those? For example,
Mm,
now you could probably boil water because you have the water from the well, and then you have the fire pit, right? Oh, except for we probably need like a cast iron pot, right?
mm,
So maybe you have the ability to make cast iron pot, or maybe you could buy one, but now you have these pieces of capital. These are assets. These are things you can use, right? And you
mm,
can combine them in all sorts of interesting and fascinating ways. Like,
mm,
what is an embellishment? An embellishment is a combination of the prerequisite pieces of skill capital, right?
mm,
Embellishments, obviously, embellishments have a rhythmic component. Embellishments have melody components, especially the ones where you switch melody notes during the embellishment itself. You're going to have control over that. And obviously, it's going to require a lot of grace note skill as well. I'm thinking about a good old bubbly note or something like that. It's like,
mm.
where does that come from? It comes from the prerequisite skills, and then you can combine it in cool, new, interesting ways, right?
I don't know if the Devil's in the Kitchen is the same version that everybody plays, but I feel like I feel like there are bubbly notes in that tune. And so when you said where did the bubbly notes come from, I free association happened in my brain. I was like, it comes
Ki-
from the Devil in the Kitchen,
Yeah, it comes from the
obviously, because
kitchen.
those
Yeah, it comes from the kitchen, bro. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
cool. I get excited by that idea and just thinking like, in the meantime, don't get discouraged. You're already having more fun and feeling more confident and stuff like that. And
Yes.
let's keep that
The
momentum
discouraged
rolling.
the discouragement you feel is just ego pain. That's my experience,
And that's
right?
probably good. It's probably good
Yeah.
for our egos to feel some pain.
It's like, ah, man, like I wanted to be better than I currently am. Like
Mm,
that's where the frustration comes from. It does not come from your inability to do it, right?
yeah.
It's like,
That's a deep cut there, Andrew. That kinda
yeah,
hurts a little bit actually to realize, no, that's actually probably the motivator behind yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense.
and 99% of the time, the true problem lays way back in the foundations, something that you've skipped or overlooked. And then it's
Mm.
painful on the ego to double back. You know what I'm saying? What's the real reason you can't tune? Is it because you can't hear it or because you're not willing to do the steps?
Yeah.
It's like you haven't learned to blow steadily. So it doesn't matter how hard you try to tune, it's not going to work. You're going to have to grab onto some patience. You're going to have to set that ego aside, at least in private. You don't have to do it
Yeah.
publicly. You got to set that ego aside and you got to be like, all right, let's think about blowing steadily here a little bit and fix some of
Mhm.
these issues. It's like, oh, well, like, what do you know? Every time I transition from blowing to squeezing, I have a giant surge. If that happens, if I don't fix that, then how am I ever going to tune myself? Aha.
Yeah.
Okay. Or it's like, man, every time I try to blow steadily, I have a giant surge between squeezing and blowing. What's up with that? You know what? Before I do too much work on that, I better check if my bag is holding air. Oh, my bag is
Yeah.
leaking like a sieve. How the heck are you supposed to blow steadily if your bag's leaking air? So now we have, how am I supposed to tune if I can't blow steadily? How can I blow steadily if my bagpipe doesn't hold air? And so, 99 times out of 100, the real issue, the root cause is down lower. And then it's how am I supposed to habitually keep my bag airtight if if I'm not excited about bagpiping? So it could go even a layer
Mm.
deeper. It's like, man, I'm not even really listening to bagpipe music. I'm not actually even getting fired up about this. So maybe that's the true root of the problem.
Mm.
Or I can't keep my bag airtight because I only play once every 3 weeks because I don't have a daily practice ritual in place. So anyway, the thing that hurts about it is, in my experience, it's all ego based. When are you gonna find time to do work? And by the way, it doesn't have to be a lot, but we have to find time to do a little bit of work
Mm.
on a fairly daily basis. Mm.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense for my personal experience that like a big part of it, if I'm honest with myself, is I don't want it's not necessarily that I don't want to be in my feeling going back to these fundamentals. It's that I don't want to acknowledge that I need to go back, right?
Mm,
I want to already have these things mastered and acknowledging that
yes.
they're so not mastered, that's definitely kicking my ego in the pants, that's
Yes,
for sure.
exactly. No, like I'm sort of blessed in the bagpipe realm. I got through all of this when I was too young to realize that it should be difficult, and therefore I think it probably
Yeah.
happened really fast. But like other areas of my life, I'm pathetic. Business or my personal fitness or these other things that I enjoy. It's painful. It's like the problems I'm having right now are going to require a deep look into my soul.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to
and it's
face my
dark in there.
demons.
It's scary to
Yeah,
look.
yeah. It's like, oh, wait a minute.
Now, Andrew, speaking of business, it seems I don't know if this is still a thing, but it seems like at least a few years ago, everybody was going back to school to get their MBA.
Yeah,
But that's not the kind of MBA we're talking about when it comes to bagpipe freedom.
no.
So we mentioned a little bit at the top of the episode, but I wonder if this is a reasonable time to drill in a little bit. Well, there are two things that kind of work together here. I want to talk a little bit about the blowing at the optimal pressure, the sweet
Yeah, that
spot
should
for a
come
reed.
first. That
And then
comes
from
first
there, I wanna go to
logically.
MBA.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that what's going on there? If you
So
could
with
tell me a
the
little bit about that.
yeah, so with any read, at least any double read, I don't have much experience with other kinds of reeds. But anyway, with the bagpipe reed, Jim, there's a range of possible pressures you could play. And by the way, the practice chanter illustrates this perfectly well, if not more clear, right? So here's one of the possible pressures I could play. Right? So that's one possible pressure I could play,
It's
right?
technically you're playing, so I
Yep.
guess so.
There it is, right? There you can't possibly criticize that. That was beautiful. And then here's another possible pressure. Sort of play there,
Mhm.
but something's going on there. I'm not sure what that is. Am I blowing so hard that my chanter is like literally cutting out and making all sorts of messed up sounds?
Yeah, that's not my subpar internet listening audience. That was produced by Andrew at the point of the chanter.
Yeah, exactly. That was not the internet fading out on us. Not
Mm,
today, Jim.
not
We've got the internet
today.
sorted. I just have one thing I like to say to the internet. Not today.
So I
There's one thing we say to death. What is that what it was?
what is that? I don't I like it, but I don't
It's from Arya Stark's training with the swordsman, the first sword of Bravos there. What's his face?
man, Arya Stark? That's
Game of Thrones?
oh, I'm sitting here trying to think how who is Arya to Tony Stark? I'm sitting here being like,
Oh,
I didn't realize I was
yeah.
that out of
Yeah.
touch with the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah,
I'm
okay.
sure Game of Thrones will be joining the Marvel universe soon enough.
Sounds
Okay.
good,
What were we
yeah.
talking about? Ah, yes. The two examples I just gave you on the practice channel. One was me blowing at basically the lowest viable pressure.
Mhm.
And then the next pressure was the highest, and it wasn't even really viable, was it? But at a very high pressure. That
Semi-viable.
illustrates, yeah, there's a range of possible pressures that you can play your reed at. Okay.
Mhm.
And you can't just do whatever you want. Reason being, did you hear what it sounded like when I just blew at the low end? Sound good.
Probably none of us wants to sound that way.
That's right. One of the important things that every bagpiper must do is identify what pressure their reed sounds the best at. Not reasonable to ask someone to blow steadily unless you tell them what the pressure is first,
Yes.
and then you can tell people to blow steadily, right?
It sounds so sensible and so simple
It
when you say
is.
it this way,
It's
Andrew,
just basic logic. Yes.
but the thing is, at least I have spent many years describing to people that they need to blow
Yeah.
steadily
Blow steady, you idiot.
without giving them that, target point and
Yes,
saying, "Blow
exactly right.
steadily this hard."
It's shoot
That
your
is so
arrow. Hey,
important.
Jim, shoot your arrow accurately, okay?
Totally, that is
Hey,
exactly how ludicrous it is, yeah.
Jim, you idiot. Just be accurate. Be accurate with your archery, okay?
Right, right.
Just be accurate, okay? Wait a minute. There's an important piece of information there. There needs to be a target, like a target is a prerequisite to accuracy, is it not?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It is, right? So blowing steadily is impossible unless you have a target. All
Yeah.
right. And so, what is the target when we play the pipes? And the target is the sweet spot. And in the book, we get into more details about exactly how to find it. But let's just say, of all the possible pressures, you want to find what pressure is the best. Which, by the way, the way I find it, my definition of the sweet spot is it's actually the maximum amount of pressure you can apply to your chanter reed.
Mm,
Okay. That's the sweet spot. Now, there's a little asterisk there because once you go past a certain point, your reed starts to make sounds that are suboptimal, unpredictable, kind of crappy, right?
right.
But the thought process for me is anytime I play any bagpipe, whether it's my own or someone else's or whatever, I'm always blowing that reed as hard as I possibly can. And I'm testing the top end of the pressure, right? I'm always pushing that top end to the point where it'll get to the point where it starts to sound a little overloaded and distorted. And that's how I know I've hit the ceiling and I just probably want to dial it back a tiny smidge. And then that's my point. And then that's where I'm going to blow steady moving forward. That's the sweet spot. That's where the chanter sounds the sweetest. It's where it's the most stable. And that's the target we need to learn to hit.
So to be super duper clear, in case it's not clear, we're not necessarily saying here that a person should be blowing as like the maximum pressure possible for their physical body to apply to the reed. It's the maximum physically possible point for the reed
For
to
the reed.
receive without going
Correct.
beyond sounding ideal. So if it starts getting
Yes.
into Squeaksville, then you got to back up a little bit.
Yep. And the interesting thing about the sweet spot is it never stays the same, right?
Ain't that the truth?
So it's not going to stay the same. So for every different chanter reed, the sweet spot will be different.
Not to
But
mention over the course of each
yeah,
reed's life, it'll change too.
yeah, but wait, there's more. As the reed changes over time, the sweet spot might change. During your playing session, the sweet spot almost certainly changes because
Yeah.
during the beginning, it's like dry and cold and not warmed up. And then as you introduce moisture and warmth into the reed, the sweet spot will probably change as you play and so on.
Mm.
It's a feeling that you have to develop as you play. You learn to feel what the sweet spot's going to be. And again, there's unconscious competence again. We kind of want to
Yeah.
get to the point where we can feel that we're blowing our chanter reed at the sweetest possible point, and that's what we're going to go for. And I feel like there was even still more. Oh yeah, and then the weather, like the weather
Oh,
outside
yeah.
will
Mm.
change, right? So the sweet spot is something that's going to change as you go. So first thing we want to do is understand how to find it, how to find that sweet spot, and then we want to learn how to maintain it over time.
Yeah. It it feels like a good and important thing to point out that that spot's gonna change. So there's some value in being like you say, you wanna get to the point where you can feel it. So it's like you mentioned earlier, you don't want to make a habit out of doing things wrong because then you have to unlearn stuff later. But at the
Yes.
same time, there is a big element of like, you got to do this stuff a lot so you can develop a sense for what's going on and
Yes.
try to keep the improvements in mind, but also play your bagpipes every single day. That's still a really big deal. Even if you don't
Yeah.
100% know what you're doing, that's a big part of getting to where you can sense, you can feel where your reeds are at, what your bag is doing, all these kinds of things. You're
Yes.
not going to get a feel for it if you don't do it a lot.
Exactly. And I can also tell you, just like everyone, if you don't know for sure that you're playing with rhythmic accuracy, I will tell you that there's a 99 point, like, I'll tell you that you're playing ahead of the beat, right?
Yeah.
Tell me you play ahead of the beat without telling me you play ahead of the beat. But you either know that you're rhythmically there or you're ahead of the beat. Same with the chanter read. So unless you know you're at the sweet spot, you're drastically below. Like I can
Mhm.
just give you that as a hint out of the gate. So anyway, let's move on to the next topic. What else? So
Yeah.
we got that. The other thing is we talked, and we don't have to go into that in depth today because we've talked about it in fairly recent episodes of the podcast, but just the art of tuning your drones to the chanter itself. That's one of the skills that's in there,
Yeah.
which by the way, you don't want to do that before you've identified the sweet spot either.
Yeah.
So the sweet spot is the first thing once you introduce the chanter. That's the first thing we want to concern ourselves with because logically it's a prerequisite to the things that come next.
Yeah.
So we want to tune the drone to the chanter, but if we don't know what pressure we're going to blow the chanter at, then it's going to be hard to be in tune, right? But anyway, you can use the blow trick, you can use trial and error, whatever you need to do, but practicing getting one drone in tune with the chanter is a key element there. And then the next thing you wanted to talk about, Jim, was the third thing, which is the MBAs. All the rage
Yes.
right now. Everyone's
Yes.
doing it.
What is that? Masters of Business Administration? Is that what
Yeah,
it stands for?
mastery of blowing administration.
That's the that's it.
Yeah.
That's the one. Mental blowing anomalies.
Yeah.
What? No, the air doesn't come from my brain. What are you saying, Andrew Douglas?
Yes.
That's ridiculous.
Uh-huh. A physical blowing anomaly are those are quite we know about those, right? That's when you blow in, you transition to the squeeze, and then there's some sort of pressure problem during the physical blowing cycle.
Mhm.
It would be cool if that's all that it was, but that's not all that it is. And by the way, this happens all the time. For example, do you ever find yourself doing a complicated task in normal life and holding your breath? Does that
Oh,
ever
for
happen?
sure, yeah. Yeah,
Happens all the
absolutely.
time, right? Subconsciously, we have little mental tics that cause our standard ongoing procedures. They cause hiccups in our standard ongoing procedures. Or
Mhm.
walking and chewing bubblegum at the same time. That's like or patting your head and rubbing your tummy, which
Yeah, yeah.
interestingly, I don't have that much of a problem doing. Oh, it's harder
Oh,
with these hands. No, but like
yeah.
but anyway,
You gotta
but like breathing is something that we do all the time, right? But like sometimes something complicated happens where you hold your breath, or
yeah.
it sometimes can be a really stressful part in a movie or something, and you hold your breath or
Oh,
something
for
like that.
sure. Yeah.
But anyway, bagpiping is the same way. So we're on the bagpipes, we're operating this thing and we're blowing and squeezing and we're attempting to do steadily, and we might even be able to do that. Okay, but what tends to happen is our finger work causes those functions to short circuit. It happens
Mhm.
all the time, right? So the most common example is when a beginner goes up and plays high A, right?
Yes.
9
I
times out of
mean,
10, when a beginner goes up and
I
plays high
agree.
A, for some reason, and I actually think it's because the death grip that we have on the chanter, we're suddenly forced to let go of it. And I think it causes like
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
I think it causes an oh crap knee jerk falling off a cliff feeling. Uh,
That makes sense. I think there's also the possibility that for me personally, I played other wind instruments before playing the bagpipes.
yeah,
And so if anybody else is in that boat too, of course the higher you get, the harder you blow. That's part of the rules. You're gonna play trumpet, you're gonna play oboe,
maybe.
whatever you're gonna play, you gotta blow harder to get higher. I think that
Sure.
probably contributes to it as well.
Yeah. Well, and maybe it does happen a little bit on high G. Whatever. It doesn't really matter because we have these arguments all the time. This is what cool cerebral bagpipers do, man. We love having these conversations.
This
There's
is
also
this
the
is
fallacy.
we're the cool ones.
There's also the fallacy that the high A takes more air than other notes, which by the way,
By the way, I just wanna pause for a minute and acknowledge that I don't know about Matt McIsaac and Lincoln Hilton. I don't think the 2 of them are sitting somewhere right now they're probably off playing their
I
bagpipes.
know
You and I, man, we're the cool ones.
exactly. Those who can't do teach, and those who can't teach have a
Podcast.
podcast talking about bagpipes. Yeah, exactly.
That's about
Yeah.
right.
Uh-huh. Story of my life.
Sorry, I totally threw you off there
What were we even talking
for
about?
sake of the joke.
We were talking about
Why would finger work affect my blowing?
we're talking about, I was talking about the fallacy that the high A takes more air than other notes,
Oh,
right?
yeah, I've heard that the D takes more air than other
Yeah.
notes.
And the
What's up
truth of
with
the
that?
matter is, the reason it's a fallacy is not because it's definitely wrong. It's possible that these notes might take more air than others. But the reason it's a
Mm,
fallacy is because we only have one option as bagpipers, and that is to achieve a steadiness of blowing. It
mm,
doesn't matter if the high A takes more air or not. We need to achieve a steadiness of blowing, and that is never going to be achieved by attempting to blow harder or softer when certain notes come up in the tune that you're playing, right?
Oh,
It's
I
just not a
imagine if
thing.
you're especially the faster the tune gets, just what
Yeah.
an impossible thing.
Yes. And then if the high A takes more air, wouldn't you want to blow harder on it and not
Yeah.
less? There's a problem
Mm.
there because right now the problem is radical surging on the high A. So it's not the fact that the high A takes more air that's causing that problem logically, I don't think.
Mm,
So anyway, it's a mental blowing anomaly. It's something your body is doing as a result of playing that note. Okay.
mm.
And it's very common, and we need to learn to not do it. We need to learn to quiet the mind, so to speak, Jim,
Yes,
and
yeah.
not change our blowing as a result of things that our fingers might be doing. The other thing that tends to happen a lot is you get to the end of the part of Green Hills and you have that nice long low A after some complicated finger work.
Yeah.
And then people tend to take a mental vacation on those notes and
Yeah.
they let the pressure sag off on the long notes, which we don't
Yeah.
want that either. And then we have bad blowing on D. I'm not sure D takes more or less air than others, but I definitely feel like it's more sensitive. It's less stable. So it's
Mm,
more sensitive to changes in blowing than other notes. And it's
interesting. 'Cause
also the interval is probably possibly more difficult to tune than other intervals as well.
mm,
So there's a lot of stuff going on there that might cause the D to be difficult to control blowing wise.
yeah. That's interesting because I do feel like I tend to overblow the D in the same way that I tend to overblow the A, but maybe there are a couple things going on there
Mhm.
that that are having that effect.
Yes.
I like that you mentioned that we need to quiet our mind because
Quiet the mind, Jim.
it's been
Just
striking
like
me more.
just like me. Don't when you look at me, don't you think, "Oh, that guy's mind is quiet.
Yeah, that guy's got his shiz together. That's what I
That
think
guy's
to
got a
myself.
quiet mind."
Yeah.
Not to be confused with a dull mind,
Or
or a sharp mind.
a sharp mind. I can't help thinking of the Johnny Cash song that the hardest thing in the world to find is a man with a satisfied mind. I've
Wow.
got Johnny Cash's living
I
in my brain rent free all the time.
There it is. I don't have that. You got I Love
Yeah.
Lucy and you got Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
I like me some Johnny Cash, but, like, in small quantities is that's fine.
A lot of old musicals too, Andrew. In so many ways,
Oh,
my brain belongs in a bygone era in mostly very cheesy, campy ways, actually. I think of it.
since I feel like the canon of musicals is similar to the Bible in the sense that it contains, like, all of ancient human knowledge acquired over hundreds of years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Phantom of the
Absolutely.
Opera, Cats, and then Les Mis.
That's like the most important book in the canon, of course.
I feel like Les
Um,
Mis I feel like Les Mis got a little cocky, that's what I think. They
and into it
overdid it.
once
They
it
A musical should only do so much.
How about the power to move you?
There it is,
Sorry,
Lion King.
Tenacious D is another one of the artists who's always in my brain.
Yes,
It's a fun salad.
there you
But
go.
what what I wanted to say a thing about bagpipes still, and now I can't remember what it was. It was that, oh, yeah, quieting your mind. That,
Quiet
like,
your
as
mind, Jim.
I was reading through this section for the 3rd or 4th time now, and it struck me more than ever before how interesting it is that, at least to me, and feel free to tell me I'm wrong about this, Andrew, but the more I think about it, the more it seems like this interesting thing where it's like, you start with, like, this everything mushed together craziness going on with bagpiping, right? Where it's like, you got your blowing and your squeezing and your finger work and everything all in there. And the whole goal of this process is to pull that apart and take one piece at a time and focus on it
Mhm.
and then put it back together. But in an interesting way, the best way to put some of these things together is a kind of maintained separateness. It's like separateness becomes togetherness in a way. And what I
Mhm.
mean by that is that your blowing should be unaffected by your finger work. And in
Yes.
that way, the two things are very separate from each other in different tracks in your brain.
Yep,
But by being so separate, they can work together so much better than when it was
totally.
all a mess before.
It's like separation of duties, yeah, exactly. This corner of my brain has this job, and this corner of brain has this job, and by the way, I should be able to leave and go
And
somewhere
come
else in my
back and it'll
brain,
still be humming.
and I come back and nothing has changed in any of these
Yeah,
corners,
yeah,
and they
yeah.
haven't gotten together and to sabotage each other while I'm gone. Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that part of what's amazing about watching really good bagpipers, though? Like your Lincoln Hiltons and your Stuart Littles and all the people who we talk about all the time, and so many others too, that when you're watching or listening without watching, the rock steadiness of that drone tone, and then if you can also watch the fingers or be thinking about what the fingers are doing, and just how crisp and clean and fast they're moving. I love Lincoln Hilton's fingers to me more than anyone else's look like mechanical pistons, the way that they
Yeah,
move.
sure,
Just so
but don't
regular,
be
every little
fooled.
movement. Oh,
Yeah. So Stewart is the perfect example of that.
mm,
Is a perfect example of that. His fingers distract you from a large portion of the truth. Because Stewart's got his fingers, and they do all sorts of great, and we love it. It's so great. We love it. Stewart's fingers is just amazing. But it hides a large portion of the truth,
mm.
right? If you force yourself to ignore his obnoxious fingerwork skill, right, and just listen to his bagpipe, and then what you realize is he's a literal steady blowing machine.
Yeah.
And he's like he's an elite operator of the instrument. His fingers are
Mm.
only a small or only a partial, we won't say small, but only a partial piece of that puzzle. The
Isn't
other
that
piece of the puzzle
interesting?
is the bagpipe is bloody perfect all the time. It's blown
Oh,
perfectly
surely. Yeah.
steady, right? It's blown perfectly steady, which allows it to be perfectly tuned.
Yeah.
So his blowing and his tuning are always immaculate in his sound. And then the fingerwork stuff happens on top of it. He's in control of all of it. Stewart is bagpipe freedom to a T. And it doesn't even matter
He
if
was free before it was cool.
yeah, absolutely. And there are many others like that. And then
Yeah.
there are some people where you have to wonder. It's like, okay, well, this person has an amazing bagpipe and amazing fingers. And by most of the objective measures, they're difficult to criticize. However, you don't really feel you don't really feel much when you hear them
Mm.
play. And you're like, I wonder, there must be something in there that's prohibiting them from getting to that true point where you feel like they're really expressing themselves, even though objectively they're monsters. But then you're
Sure,
like,
yeah.
but then
Yeah.
you're like, a good litmus test for that would be like, just picture in your mind 5 pipers you'd love to just go on iTunes right now and listen to. And then the people who aren't in that top 5, like, why not? It's usually not because they're out of tune or because they have crossing noises. That's not it. There's something else missing.
Yeah, yeah. So there can be a lot of
Yeah.
proficiency, but there's something about art or something there.
Yep. It might be a
Awesome.
negative consequence of the competition system or just the rigid or maybe the rigidness of bagpipers, or maybe like the military background. Who knows? But
Mm.
a lot of players achieve an incredible proficiency. But when you ask the question why, you can't find the answer, right? When you ask the question why about Stuart Little, in my opinion, you ask the question like why, there's an easy answer there. It's like, why? Because holy crap, just listen to it. It's amazing.
Mm.
And I've never heard anything like it before. And there's other players like it, right? So you're taking on these skills. They have these objectively amazing skills, but then it inverts at the top, right? So skill, 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 still. And then once you're at a certain point, now the
Mm.
possibilities are literally endless.
Yeah.
No one dreams of having your skills be literally finite.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
man, I'm so glad I worked so hard. Now the possibilities are definitively finite.
right. It's
That's
not a
not it.
saying.
That's not the
We
dream,
say
man. That's not
possibilities
the
are
dream.
endless. Not,
Yeah.
yeah. Now, it does occur to me, Andrew, that a lot of the stuff that gets talked about in this phase, as well as the phases building up to it, rightly so, might include some like somewhat tedious or monotonous tasks to be done. But there's maybe a risk of us as students of the method getting a little too if I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, I'm gonna focus on my manometer that I just hung up,"
Sure.
right? Then I'm just gonna play the one tune that I've already got down perfectly well, and I might go 3, 4 weeks just playing only that tune, thinking about these
Yes.
things.
Exactly.
So, you do mention here toward the end of this section, you say, "I do want to reiterate that the true test of these skills is to be able to realize all 8 of the active skills with relatively fresh or unknown material."
Yeah. Amen, my
And
brother.
I have had entire years go by where the only tunes that I learned that year were the 3 or 4 that I needed for a new competition medley.
Yes.
And I feel like that's okay because some of us will at times will be in a phase of life where school, work, kids, other hobbies, whatever, that's what we got bandwidth for, and I'd say that's better than nothing. So celebrate that. But
Barely.
for me
Yeah. Barely
personally,
better.
that was not the situation. The situation was I got lazy, I got comfortable. There was something where I stopped opening music books, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So like how do I keep that alive while also working on these kind of like somewhat like to some degree repetition is necessary here. So how do I do the repetition of the skill while also keeping my
Yeah.
variety moving?
I think you just want to maximize the amount that you're doing new, interesting things. And by the way, interesting, that can be dangerous as well. Sometimes it's important to work on a tune that maybe isn't your favorite,
Mm,
because maybe it isn't your favorite for a subconsciously telling reason. But yeah, we want to keep that variance going. We don't want to just stand there and stare at the manometer playing Skyboat Song your entire life. It's not going to work. And then what you're going to find is, even though you mastered Skyboat Song, there's things about other tunes that are going to throw major monkey wrenches in this. It's the same
mm.
reason you could get really good at dribbling side to side and between the legs, doing the dribbling drills and dribbling around the cones. And then you play a basketball game and your defender just steals the ball from you every time and goes and
Your
scores. And
defender's not standing still like a cone like they're
yeah,
supposed to.
exactly, right? Dribbling drills are important, yes, but only as part of a healthy diet of all the other
Mm,
activities. Yeah, I
mm,
think that's the big thing. You're in phase 4. You've got 8 things that you're trying to juggle at one time now. So how are we going to break stuff down and work on it? I recommend a regimen where you're regularly, working on these skills in an isolated situation, right? So always take the tune you're playing and practice the rhythm first, always. It only has to take a minute or two. So it's like, hey, today I'm looking at a fresh new tune, but before I look at the notes, I'm going to look at the rhythms. So let's just make
mm.
sure I have a plan. Let's make sure my accuracy is good today. Just take 5 minutes and do that. But maybe you do that Monday, but maybe on Tuesday, you're doing something else. You're just practicing doing reps, tuning 2 drones together. And maybe some days you're playing at the sweet spot and trying to maintain it. Maybe some days you're looking at a manometer. Maybe some days you're just not purposely not looking at it and just working on your sort of basic intuition. Maybe some days you're comparing your basic
Mm.
intuition to the facts. Like you could do a blind manometer recording where the recorder picks up the manometer, but you're not looking at it. And then you could be like, aha, okay. So habitually I'm underblowing. When I'm not looking at the manometer, I'm underblowing. So that means in general, when I'm playing, I need just working on it. And then
That
never
one's a
the same
threshold I have
tune.
yet to cross, and it
Yeah.
scares me.
And then never the same tune for too long. You can't play your 2/4 march exclusively for 492 days, right? That's going to make you worse. It's not even going to keep you at the same level. You're going to go back off the back of the plateau there.
Yeah.
It's like if you only ever played basketball against the same opponent.
And yeah, especially if the opponent was like a robot that only did the same 4
Mhm.
moves the whole time.
Yep.
I have great respect and envy, for people who are very skilled sight readers of music,
Yeah.
but I watched it happen with my closest friend and good bagpiping buddy from the beginning, where he just got to the point where this is what he was doing all day, every day. He was just going through music books from the cover on the front to the cover in the back.
Right.
And at first, it took him 2 days per tune.
Yeah.
By the end, he could bust through 12 new tunes in a sitting and,
Can you
not
what
master
about
it.
by ear though? Like, so let's flip the script. Like, how well do you
Yeah.
learn tunes by ear? If you spend all your time mastering sight reading, maybe you'll develop some proficiency. But then
Yeah.
there's some people who can just pick up a tune by ear. And I am proud to say, not really that proud, but like, I can do both pretty easily, pretty fast. So
Yeah.
memorization is kind of in that category too. Oh, you're a great player, but it takes you 4 months to memorize each tune.
Yeah.
I'm a slightly less great player, but I've got 47 tunes I can play by memory. Which position would you rather be in? And there's trade-offs. Maybe all you care
Yeah.
about is
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
blue ribbon. If all you care about is blue ribbon, then you only have to memorize a couple tunes per year and play them really
Mhm.
well, even though that's not actually probably true in the long run, right? Whereas,
You could just
whereas
do
if you're a
6 tunes
Kaylee
once and
piper,
rotate them.
yeah, whereas if you're a Kaylee piper and you only know 3 tunes, they'll probably laugh you off the stage. It's, "Hey,
Yeah, pretty quick.
we've heard your 2/4 march 47 times already. Play us something
Yeah.
new, bro."
Yeah.
And the thing is we wanna be well-rounded generalists, for sure. We wanna be a
Yeah.
well-rounded generalist, or at least 80%. At least 80% of what we're doing should be focused on well-rounded, general, great musicianship. And then some of our time can be spent specializing. You can
Yeah.
specialize, you can play in a solo competition, or you can play in your pipe band. Those are specialized things. But of course, we wanna be generally good.
Andrew, you know what I just realized?
That we've been
We
recording for 80 minutes.
Well, there's that, but the other thing is that we dove right into this without reading the Steven Spielberg quote that is
Oh,
at the top of the chapter.
why don't we end this episode with the quote?
Yeah. You got your physical book there. Why don't you do you wanna read it off for us? This is from Steven Spielberg.
No, I think that's you have to read it, don't you? Do you have it?
Let me, I do have it here. Let me get into proper voice.
Man, this is a good quote. Wasn't there a chapter recently that had no quote?
There was, yeah. It must have been chapter 6 or 7 because I think it was pretty recent.
Yeah, it was chapter 6.
This is seriously, this really is a very good quote.
I
Okay.
know. It makes up for missing a quote in chapter
Mm.
6.
So Steven Spielberg once said, The delicate balance of mentoring someone is not creating them in your own image, but giving them the opportunity to create themselves.
Yes.
It's a very
Yeah.
good one.
It reminds me of an Ayn Rand quote about raising children as well, which is ironic because Ayn Rand never had children. But
But it puts me right in the mind of the Simpsons episode when Maggie goes to the Ayn Rand school for babies, which is very
yeah.
funny. But go on.
Yeah, Randians, I think they were very randy, if you know what I'm saying, but they didn't procreate that often. But anyway, like Ayn Rand would have said that which by the way, I kind of hold in my mind somewhere when raising my own children, like the idea is not to forge children into a specific image, but as a parent, your job is to raise them to become independent, right? Allowing
Mm,
them to make their own like decisions based on their own rational faculties. And I think Spielberg is talking about something similar here, right? It's if he was teaching people to create films and all of his students came out with films that were just basically Spielberg ripoffs, right?
right.
I would consider him a failure as a teacher, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
Which is ironic AF, Jim, in the bagpipe
Mm,
world, right? Because how many students are, and actually it's a lot better now than maybe 20 years ago, but how many students are just uninteresting carbon copies of their instructors? A
to
lot.
the
I
point
mean,
where you
it's
could
better. It's
just
so
about
much better now. It's so much better now. I think the internet has helped so much and
yeah.
YouTube and everything. People are really digging into what they enjoy and allowing it to influence how they sound. But yeah, ironic.
It
It's in
speaks
yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it speaks very highly of a person too, that they would feel secure enough that their interest in teaching a person is to help that person achieve that kind of freedom of expression, not to be like, I need to verify that I'm the best by making sure that everybody else does stuff the way I do it. No.
Right. Exactly. Well, it's a very static, undynamic approach to things.
Mm,
Yes.
mm,
So you can think for millions of years, I don't even know. No, millions seems like a lot, but a big number, thousands and thousands and thousands of years, there have been some version of humans around, right? And we have these amazing rational faculties, but it's only extremely recently that we've developed institutions that allow for free thinking and free thought. So I don't think it's a coincidence that we have this problem in the bagpipe world, right? Freedom of thought and a culture of criticism, it's emerging, I think, finally in the bagpipe world, but only sort of.
mm.
Like, do you get the feeling that if you criticize certain bagpiping institutions, yourself and all the people you love would be blacklisted forever?
Oh, I don't know if I should say it out
Yeah,
loud,
we
but our good
let
friend Big Rab is having a heck of a time of it across the pond right now.
yeah, and who knows? Let's not go any deep. I think there are probably many institutions, even like local pipe bands,
Mm,
where it's you just don't question what's going on. And if you do, you're out of line, which is, of course, not the right thing. We
yeah.
want people to be questioning. And we want to know that I think one of the cool things about top pipe bands is when you question, you're not like immediately shunned. I remember Terry Lee was so great to work with in that respect. You wouldn't do it during band practice, like, yo, Terry, why are you doing it this way? But you could talk to him about it later and you would say, like, Terry, I don't think this is working. And he would often say, actually, bro, it is working. And here's why we do it this way and why you're wrong. And you're like, oh yeah, okay.
Mm,
But then he would also, if you did approach him with an intriguing idea, he would instantly like want to know more. These great pipe bands are dynamic mini societies as opposed
mm.
to static. Which, by the way, what the hell are we even talking about? Oh yeah, the Steven Spielberg quote. Exactly.
Yes.
I think there are fundamentals of great filmmaking.
Mm,
I'm sure it's true. I'm not really a
yeah.
filmmaker, but I'm sure it's true. And then what you would do is you would teach people to master those fundamentals. But why? Right. And then you do that so that they can then start to create ideas in their own voice.
Mm,
I had a professor, a famous electroacoustic musician named Barry Truax that we studied with at Simon Fraser University. And I had a really hard time with him at first because he
mm.
was just like, no, nope, B minus, nope, nope, nope. And eventually you got the idea, which at first is very insulting. If I don't do it the way he does it, he's not going to give me a good grade.
Yeah.
And that's just evil, right? I'll tell you what started to happen is I decided, screw it. I'm just going to do it his way instead of hard-headedly insisting on my way all the time. And I did it all my I started to do it his way, and my grades started to improve, but you know what else? It's like my music started to improve as
Uh,
well, and I started to feel
yeah.
a lot better about it, and I started to have all sorts of new ideas. And what was really going on there is I think we're probably learning the fundamentals
Mm,
of good composition. And I think in the long run, he's one of my most memorable professors.
mhm.
Not the ones who are like, "Hey, man, yeah, just yeah, whatever you want to do, buddy. Yeah, go ahead." Those are good teachers in a sense as well. But anyway, yeah. What was the quote again? It was, "You don't want to
Me
create people in your own image. You want to let
right,
them."
not creating them in your own image, giving
Yeah,
them the opportunity to create themselves.
yep. And that's just it, isn't it? It's a hard thing to do. And by the way, students hate it as much as teachers might hate it too. It's like,
Yeah.
wait, it's like, what do you mean I have to make my own decisions? What do you mean you're not just going to give me the fish?
It
What
can
do you
be
mean I have
such
to learn to
a
fish? You
what do you
promised me
is that a
fish.
is it called a honey trap? I don't know if that's the right word for it, but, like, such a tempting thing to be like, "No, just tell me exactly what I need to do to get the grade or to feel like I'm doing okay," whatever it is, the situation.
What is
Tell
a
me
honey
exactly what
trap?
I wanna do.
Honey trapping is an investigative practice involving the use of romantic or sexual. No,
Uh,
that can't be it.
I guess that's probably not the right word for it then.
But anyway, but that was
I just meant
Wikipedia.
something that's attractive and it gets you s but it's not good for you, it gets you stuck. So maybe that
Exactly.
fit, you
No, but
know?
you're right. So Cambridge Dictionary says something that is very attractive and attracts a lot of people.
Mm. Yeah, so maybe that's applicable. It's easy to point to it in academics, you know, it's like, well, right, like, do you wanna learn the topic, the
Yeah.
subject, or
But
do you
then
wanna
honey
just know
trapping is
exactly
like,
which bubbles to fill in to get the grade, right? There's
exactly.
differences in there.
I think honey trapping is the well known espionage practice of using certain human behaviors as bait to extract information, which is the
Yeah,
same thing.
that's
We're talking about the same thing here.
we're talking about the same thing.
It just one of
And,
them went
like,
in the wrong direction.
this is the danger of doing an unscripted format, right? That sometimes I say words and phrases, and only after do I think to myself, "I don't think that was right."
Yeah, maybe shouldn't have said that. That
Yeah.
happens to me regularly. There's no one here at the moment, but this is one of those things, Jim. You record the podcast, later it comes out. You've forgotten what you said,
Yeah. Yeah,
and then you end up in a whole bunch of trouble.
oh, ain't that the truth. Ain't that the truth.